but she offered her body for shelter, but the rancher gave her a forever instead. The wind blew hard across the empty fields, cutting through layers of clothing as if it were trying to strip the world bare. Snow fell thick and fast, covering the ground in a white blanket that seemed to stretch forever. Every step she took sank into the cold, and her fingers and toes were numb despite the gloves and thick boots she wore. She had been walking for hours, but it felt like she had gone nowhere. Each gust of wind seemed louder, more urgent, as if the storm itself were warning her to turn back. But there was nowhere to go. She had nowhere to turn. Her name was Emily. She had lived in the city once, in a small apartment with a roof that didn't leak and neighbors who didn't mind her presence. Life had been normal then, or at least as normal as life could feel when money ran out too fast and bills piled up like a mountain she could never climb. But now, everything was gone. The eviction notice had been final. The bank refused to offer any help, and friends had their own lives to worry about. The warmth of her old apartment, the faint smell of coffee and books, even the small potted plants she had nurtured, it was all gone. Now, there was only the storm and the ache in her stomach that grew with each hour. The forest she had passed through earlier offered little protection. The trees were tall and bare, their branches scratching at her face as she stumbled along. Snow clung to the branches and fell suddenly, striking her shoulders and making her shiver. Her coat, though thick, was damp from the constant falling snow. Every step was heavier than the last, and she felt the chill seep into her bones. Dusk. She tried to keep walking, telling herself that somewhere ahead there might be warmth, there might be safety. But as the hours passed, doubt crept in. Maybe there was nowhere left for her. Then, through the swirling snow, she saw it. A faint light flickered in the distance. At first, she thought it was a trick of her tired eyes, a reflection of the moon on the snow. But as she squinted, she realized it was a house. A real house, with warm light shining through the windows. Her heart lifted, and for the first time in hours she felt a spark of hope. She ran, or at least as fast as her frozen legs would allow, towards the glow. Every step was agony, but the thought of warmth, of fire, of shelter pushed her forward. When she reached the edge of the property, she stopped to catch her breath. The house was small but solid, a wooden ranch that seemed to rise from the snow like a beacon. Smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the smell of burning wood into the cold air. She pressed her hands to the door, her fingers numb and trembling. She knocked, her heart pounding in her chest. "Hello!" she called, her voice barely audible over the wind. There was a pause, and for a moment she thought no one was home. But then the door opened, and a man stood there. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a thick coat and a hat that shaded most of his face. His eyes were kind, though they held a hint of surprise. He looked at her, and she realized she must look like a ghost, pale, wet, shivering, and desperate. "You're out in the storm?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "Come in before you freeze." She nodded, too exhausted to speak. She stepped inside, and the warmth hit her like a wave. The air smelled of wood smoke and something else. Food, perhaps, though she couldn't be sure. The floor was clean, the walls sturdy, and for the first time in days, she felt her shoulders relax just a little. The man closed the door behind her and hung her wet coat on a hook. "Sit by the fire," he said, gesturing to a small hearth in the corner. "I'll get you something warm to drink." Emily sank onto the nearest chair, her hands shaking as she held them near the fire. She could feel the heat slowly creeping into her fingers, her toes, her cheeks. It was almost overwhelming, the simple comfort of warmth after so long in the cold. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. She had forgotten how to trust people, how to ask for help without feeling like a burden. The man returned with a cup of tea, steam rising from it, and handed it to her. Brasp. "Here," he said. "This will help." She took it, her hands clutching the cup as if it were a lifeline. She blew on it gently and sipped. The warmth spread through her chest, easing some of the tightness in her lungs and the ache in her stomach. She let out a quiet sigh. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice small.
I don't even know your name. Call me Jack, he said, with a faint smile.
"And you are—" "Emily," she said. Her eyes dropped to the floor, embarrassed by the state she must look in. I didn't know where else to go?" "Storm. I didn't think I'd make it." Jack nodded, understanding in his gaze. He didn't ask why she was out in the storm, didn't judge her or question her choices. He simply handed her another blanket and gestured for her to sit closer to the fire. Emily felt a mix of relief and shame. She had considered everything. What she might have to do to survive, what sacrifices she might need to make just to have a roof over her head. But now, sitting here, she realized that maybe there was another way. Someone who could offer help without asking for something in return. It was a foreign thought, one she hadn't allowed herself to consider in a long time. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the storm raging outside but the house standing firm against it. Emily sipped her tea slowly, savoring the warmth and the quiet. Jack moved around the room, tending to small chores, stacking firewood, checking the windows, making sure the house was secure. There was a rhythm to his movements, a steady calm that made the chaos outside feel even more distant. "Do you need anything else?" he asked after a while. Emily shook her head. "No. I didn't expect anyone to." "Care." Her voice cracked slightly, and she looked down at her hands.
Jack paused and looked at her. "Everyone deserves help sometimes," he said simply.
"You just happen to need it tonight, that's all." Prass. The simplicity of his words struck her. No judgment, no expectation, no demand. Just help. It felt strange, almost unreal. She had been so used to doors closing in her face, to people looking away, to the cold not just outside but inside as well. But here, in this small ranch with this stranger who had opened his door to her, there was warmth, not just the warmth of fire, but the warmth of human kindness. The night passed slowly. Emily watched the snow fall outside, feeling the exhaustion from her journey catch up to her. She knew she couldn't stay forever, that she needed to figure out what to do next. But, for the first time in days, maybe weeks, she allowed herself to rest. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to face the storm alone anymore. As she drifted off to sleep, she thought about the kindness of this man, about the simple act of opening a door and offering warmth. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of the world, but it was enough to give her hope. And in a world that had been cold and cruel for so long, that was more than enough. Woke the next morning to the soft golden light of dawn spilling through the small windows of the ranch. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside coated in a thick layer of snow that glistened like diamonds. For a moment she just lay in the chair by the fire, wrapped in the blanket Jack had given her, feeling the warmth seep into her body. The cold and fear of last night seemed like a distant memory, though she knew she had only survived because of his kindness. She took a deep breath, listening to the quiet sounds of the house. Jack was already moving around, the soft thud of his boots on the wooden floor, the clink of dishes as he prepared breakfast. Emily felt a mix of gratitude and nervousness. She had never stayed with someone she didn't know before, and the thought of intruding into someone else's life made her hesitate. But as she watched the sunlight catch the dust motes in the air, she realized that maybe this was a chance, not just to survive, but to heal. "Morning!" Jack called from the kitchen. His voice was low but steady, carrying a sense of calm that made her feel safe. "Morning," she replied softly, gathering the blanket around her shoulders. She stood and stretched, her muscles stiff from sleeping in the chair, and walked toward the kitchen. The smell of pancakes and coffee filled the air, making her stomach rumble. She hadn't eaten properly in days, and the thought of food made her feel a little human again. Jack noticed her approach and smiled. "Sit down. Breakfast is ready." Emily nodded and took a seat at the wooden table. Jack set a plate of pancakes in front of her, along with a cup of coffee that was still steaming. She looked at the simple meal and felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Bah. It had been so long since she had felt cared for, even in such a small way. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice catching slightly. Jack waved it off. "You don't have to thank me." "You needed it. That's all." They ate in silence for a few minutes, the quiet only broken by the occasional crackle of the fire. Emily noticed how calm and steady Jack seemed, how his movements were deliberate and careful, and how even the simplest tasks, pouring syrup, stirring coffee, were done with a kind of care that was rare. She felt a small warmth in her chest, a feeling that maybe this wasn't just a place to survive, but a place where she could belong, even for a little while. After breakfast, Jack went about his chores outside. He brought in firewood, checked the barn, and made sure the fences were secure against the harsh winter weather. Emily watched him from the window, feeling a mix of curiosity and admiration. She realized that he worked hard, not just for himself but for the animals and the land. There was a quiet strength about him, a sense of responsibility that made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. When he returned, he found her bundled in another blanket, staring out at the snow-covered fields. "Do you want to help me with some chores today?" he asked. Emily hesitated. She wasn't used to physical work, and she feared she might slow him down or make a mistake. But Jack's kind smile encouraged her. I can try," she said softly. Jack nodded. "Don't worry, I'll show you." Best. You'll learn quickly enough. The morning passed with Emily learning small tasks around the ranch. She fed the chickens, collected eggs, and helped with stacking firewood. Jack guided her patiently, explaining each task with simple instructions. When she made mistakes, he corrected her gently, never raising his voice or showing impatience. Each small success gave her a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in a long time. She realized that survival wasn't just about finding shelter, it was about learning to live again, and for the first time, someone was teaching her how. By midday, they stopped for lunch. Jack had prepared a simple stew with vegetables from the garden, and Emily ate heartily, savoring each bite. As they ate, Jack told stories of the ranch, how he had inherited it from his father, the challenges of maintaining the land, and the animals that depended on him. Emily listened, fascinated by the rhythm of his life, so different from the chaos she had left behind. "You really love this place," she said quietly, watching him. Jack nodded. "Perfect. And it's not easy, but it's mine."
"And it gives me purpose?" Emily thought about her own life, how she had drifted without direction, without stability.
She realized that maybe what she needed wasn't just a place to stay, but a purpose. a reason to keep going. Seeing Jack care for his land and his animals sparked something inside her, a hope that she could find that too. Over the next few days, Emily settled into a routine. She woke with the sun, helped with chores, and spent quiet evenings by the fire. Each day her confidence grew, and so did her trust in Jack. She learned to milk the cows, to mend fences, and even to help with minor repairs around the house. Jack continued to guide her, but he also gave her space to learn, to make mistakes, and to find her own rhythm. It wasn't just the chores that taught her. It was the small moments, the way Jack would pause to listen when she spoke, the quiet way he noticed when she was tired or cold, the simple smiles and nods that made her feel seen. She realized that trust was built in small ways, not grand gestures, and slowly she began to trust him, not just as a protector or a host, but as someone who genuinely cared. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emily and Jack sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets. The air was crisp, and the snow sparkled under the fading light. Emily sipped a cup of cocoa, feeling the warmth spread through her body.
"You've adapted quickly," Jack said, his voice calm. "Most people would have given up by now."
Emily smiled faintly. "I guess I had no choice. But I didn't think I'd be able to do it."
Jack looked at her, his gaze steady.
"You're stronger than you realize. You just needed a chance to see it for yourself." The storm had taken so much from her, but here, on this ranch, she had found a chance to rebuild, to learn, and to trust again. She realized that survival wasn't just about getting through the storm. It was about finding the people and places that made life worth living. Over the following weeks, their bond grew stronger. Emily began to see Jack not just as a helper or a protector, but as someone who shared his life with her. They laughed together during chores, shared quiet conversations by the fire, and even worked together to repair a section of the barn that had been damaged by the storm. Each day, Emily felt more at home, more alive, and more certain that she belonged here, at least for now. One afternoon, while feeding the horses, Emily noticed how carefully Jack handled each animal, speaking to them softly, guiding them with patience. She realized that his kindness wasn't just for people. It extended to every living thing he cared for. And she understood that this was the kind of world she wanted to be a part of. One where care, patience, and effort created something real and lasting. That evening, as they sat together watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky, Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The fear and desperation that had driven her to the ranch were still there in the back of her mind, but they were quieter now, softened by trust and human kindness. She realized that sometimes help came in unexpected ways, through simple gestures and quiet patience. Jack looked at her and smiled. "You've come a long way in a short time," he said. "I'm proud of you." Emily's heart warmed, not just from the words, but from the truth in them. She had survived the storm, yes, but she had also found something she hadn't realized she was missing: connection, purpose, and the hope that life could be better. As she prepared for bed that night, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the freezing forest to the warmth of this ranch, from fear and desperation to trust and hope, she had come a long way. And she knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. There was more to learn, more to grow, and more to discover, not just about the ranch, but about herself. For the first time in a long while, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future beyond survival. A future where she could build something meaningful, where she could trust again, and where the kindness she had found could become a part of her life. And as she drifted off to sleep by the fire, she felt a quiet certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be. The days passed like a gentle river, slow and steady, with a rhythm that Emily had never experienced before. Each morning she woke to the soft light filtering through the curtains, to the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of Jack moving about the house. The chores became familiar, almost comforting, and with each task, she discovered new skills and a quiet pride in what she could accomplish. Emily had learned to feed the chickens without dropping an egg, to collect firewood without getting lost in the snow, and even to mend small tears in the barn roof. Jack guided her patiently, explaining each task with calm precision, but he also allowed her space to figure things out herself. The first time she successfully fixed a fence on her own, she felt a rush of pride that made her chest swell. Jack had watched silently, giving her an approving nod, and it had been enough to make her feel capable and strong. But it wasn't just the work that mattered. Emily noticed how Jack had a quiet way of noticing little things, the small details that others often overlooked. When she shivered in the cold, he would quietly hand her a blanket or coat. When she struggled with a task, he never made her feel inadequate. Instead, he offered guidance with patience and encouragement. Slowly, Emily realized that this care wasn't out of obligation. It was genuine. One afternoon, they were walking through the snow-covered pasture, checking on the horses. Emily trudged beside Jack, the snow crunching beneath their boots, and she felt a peacefulness she hadn't known in years. Inspiration. "You handle the horses well," Jack said, glancing at her with a small smile. "They respond to calmness, not force." "You've learned that quickly." Emily felt a warmth rise in her cheeks.
Thanks.
I wasn't sure at first, but they seemed to trust me. Jack nodded. Trust takes time, but it's worth it. Not just with horses, but with people too. Emily looked at him, studying his face in the soft afternoon light. There was a kindness in his eyes, a steady calm that made her feel safe. She wanted to believe his words, to trust him fully, but part of her still held back, wary from past disappointments. She had learned to survive alone, to expect nothing from anyone. But here on this quiet ranch, she began to see that trust could grow slowly, carefully, without being rushed or forced. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened. They shared small moments of laughter while stacking firewood, traded stories about their childhoods, and even helped each other with the little projects that kept the ranch running. Emily learned that Jack had grown up on this land, taking over the ranch after his father passed away. He spoke fondly of his family and of the lessons he had learned from them, and Emily listened with genuine interest, fascinated by the life he had built from hard work and dedication. One evening, after a long day of chores, they sat together on the porch. The sky was painted with shades of pink and purple as the sun set, and the world seemed quiet and serene. Emily sipped hot cocoa, feeling the warmth seep into her hands, and watched Jack as he leaned back, relaxed in a way that seemed natural and easy.
"You've come a long way since the first day," he said quietly, almost as if he were thinking aloud.
Emily smiled softly. "I think I've learned more than just chores," she admitted.
I've learned patience.
And trust, and maybe that it's okay to let someone care about you. Jack looked at her, his gaze steady and thoughtful. It's not always easy to let someone in. But you've done well. You've opened yourself up slowly, and that's something most people never manage. Her heart warmed at his words. It wasn't a declaration of love, not yet, but it was recognition of her growth, her courage, and her willingness to trust. And in that quiet acknowledgement, Emily felt a connection with him that went beyond survival. It was a bond built on respect, understanding, and shared experience. As winter settled deeper into the land, the nights grew longer and colder. Emily learned to appreciate the small comforts, the crackle of the fire, the warm blankets, the steady routine that gave her a sense of belonging. Jack continued to guide her, not just in chores but in life skills she had forgotten over the years. Cooking simple meals, keeping the house organized, even the art of listening and speaking without fear. Each lesson, each shared moment, strengthened her sense of self and her trust in him. One snowy morning, Emily was feeding the animals when she noticed a small, abandoned nest in the barn. A pair of tiny, shivering chicks were huddled together, feathers fluffed against the cold.
Emily's heart ached at the sight.
She gently scooped them up, carrying them inside to warm them near the fire. Jack watched silently, impressed by her instinctive care. "You've got a soft heart," he said, his voice gentle. "It's not just for animals, it's for people too." Emily looked at him, surprised. I guess I've just learned that caring doesn't make you weak." Jack smiled, a rare softness in his eyes. "It makes you human." And that's something worth holding on to. They spent the afternoon nursing the chicks back to warmth, their laughter and quiet conversation filling the house. Emily realized that these simple moments, acts of care, shared effort, and gentle encouragement, were what truly mattered. The world outside could be harsh, unforgiving, and lonely. But here, in this small ranch, she had found a place where she could grow, trust, and even begin to hope. As the days turned into weeks, Emily and Jack's routine became a comforting rhythm. They worked together, laughed together, and shared quiet evenings by the fire. Their bond was not loud or dramatic, it was steady, patient, and real. Emily began to understand that love and connection were built not in grand gestures, but in the small, consistent acts of kindness and support. One evening, after a particularly cold day, Jack suggested they walk through the snow-covered fields. Emily hesitated, worried about the chill, but he handed her a thick scarf and nodded encouragingly. They walked side by side, the crunch of snow beneath their boots the only sound. The sky was clear, stars twinkling like distant fires in the night. Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years, the kind of quiet contentment that comes from being seen and accepted for who you are. "You've changed a lot since you came here," Jack said, his voice low and thoughtful. "You've grown stronger, calmer, more confident." Emily smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or the blankets. "I think I've learned from you," she admitted. "Not just about chores or surviving, but about trusting, about being patient, about believing that life can be good again."
Jack glanced at her, a hint of pride in his eyes. "You've learned more than you think."
And you've given me a lot too, Emily. You've reminded me why this life is worth sharing.
Emily felt her heart flutter at his words, not with fear or doubt, but with a gentle hope. She realized that she no longer saw him as just a helper or a protector. He was someone she could trust, someone she could rely on, and maybe, just maybe, someone who could become a part of her life in ways she hadn't imagined. The bond between them deepened naturally, through shared work, shared stories, and shared silences that spoke louder than words. Emily learned that connection wasn't something to force. It was something to nurture, patiently and sincerely. And in Jack, she found a presence that encouraged her to be herself, to trust again, and to hope for a future that didn't feel impossible. Winter continued its slow march across the land, but the cold no longer felt as sharp to Emily. She had warmth, shelter, purpose, and companionship. She had someone who believed in her, guided her, and offered quiet support without expectation. And in return, she offered her trust, her effort, and her growing affection. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Jack handed Emily a cup of cocoa and said quietly, "You've made this place brighter. I didn't realize how much until I saw it through your eyes."
Emily's chest tightened.
She had never felt so seen, so valued, so safe. "Thank you," she whispered.
I feel the same way.
I didn't think I could feel at home again, but I do. Here. Jack nodded, his gaze steady and warm. That's all I wanted. For you to feel safe, to feel at home.
Everything else we'll figure out together. And in that simple statement, Emily realized that the bond they shared was real.
It wasn't rushed or forced. It was steady, patient, and enduring. She felt hope bloom inside her. A hope that maybe after so many storms in her life, she could finally find something lasting, something worth holding on to. For the first time in years, Emily felt that life could be more than survival. It could be warmth, care, trust, and quiet love, the kind that grows slowly, firmly, and beautifully. As she sipped her cocoa watching the firelight dance across the room, she allowed herself to believe that she had finally found a place where she truly belonged. The days grew longer, and winter slowly gave way to early hints of spring. The snow melted in patches, leaving the earth wet and dark, but alive with the promise of growth. Birds returned, singing in the early mornings, and the first green shoots of grass peeked through the thawing ground. Emily noticed the change with a sense of quiet wonder. After months of survival, struggle, and learning, it felt as though the world itself was giving her a second chance. Jack had grown used to the rhythm of her presence. Emily's laughter had become part of the daily soundtrack of the ranch, the soft sound of her humming while feeding the chickens, the occasional playful comment as she struggled with a stubborn fence, or the quiet satisfaction in her voice when a chore was done correctly. And Emily had grown used to Jack's calm, patient presence. He moved through his day with a steady hand and a watchful eye, always noticing the little things, always offering quiet support. One crisp morning, Emily woke before sunrise. The sky was still dark, but the faint light of dawn was beginning to touch the horizon. G dressed quietly and stepped outside, drawn by the fresh air and the soft, peaceful silence of the ranch. The snow had melted enough to reveal patches of damp earth, and the smell of wet soil and pine filled the air. She walked to the barn, thinking about the months that had passed, the storms she had endured, and the warmth she had found in this unexpected place. Jack emerged from the house a few minutes later, carrying a bucket of feed. "Morning," he said, his voice soft but carrying easily in the quiet. "Morning," Emily replied, smiling. She felt a small flutter of happiness in her chest just seeing him. They worked together in companionable silence, feeding the animals, checking fences, and moving supplies. There was no rush, no urgency, just a steady, gentle rhythm that made Emily feel grounded and alive. She had never known such calm before. Her life had always been a rush from one crisis to the next, filled with fear, worry, and uncertainty. Here, every action had purpose, every task had meaning, and every shared moment carried a quiet joy. Psst. After finishing their chores, they returned to the house. Emily helped Jack carry in firewood, and he set it by the hearth. The sun had risen now, casting a golden glow across the room. Emily paused, looking out the window at the fields, the animals grazing peacefully, and the distant trees swaying gently in the morning breeze. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the safety and shelter she had found, but for the life she was beginning to rebuild. Jack noticed her gaze.
"You've come a long way," he said quietly. "Not just in chores, but in everything."
You've grown stronger, more confident, and more yourself. Emily turned to him, feeling her cheeks warm. I feel different, she admitted.
I feel like I can breathe again. Like I can finally start living instead of just surviving. Jack smiled, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, the quiet room and the golden light streaming through the windows. "I'm glad," he said simply. "You deserve that, Emily. You deserve to feel safe, to feel at home, and to be happy." Emily felt a lump in her throat. She had never heard such sincerity spoken to her before. The storms of her past had left her wary, cautious, and hesitant to believe in kindness. But Jack's words were different. They carried truth, patience, and care. And slowly she realized that she could trust them. She could trust him. Over the next few weeks, spring arrived in full. The fields turned green, the flowers began to bloom, and the ranch felt alive in a way it hadn't in months. Emily and Jack continued their routines, but there was a new lightness to their days. They worked side by side in the fields, planted seeds together, and even took quiet walks along the edge of the property, enjoying the sounds and smells of the changing season. One afternoon, while repairing a section of fence that had been damaged by melting snow, Emily paused to catch her breath. Jack was nearby, hammering nails with steady hands. Disgustingly. She looked at him, studying the lines of his face, the gentle strength in his movements, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "You know," she said quietly, "I never thought I'd feel this way again."
About anything. Life. Hope. People.
Jack looked at her, setting down the hammer.
It's easy to lose hope when the world feels against you, he said.
But you found your way back. You learned to trust again, and that's a rare thing. Emily smiled, a little shyly. And you made that possible. You gave me more than shelter. You gave me a chance to be myself, to believe again. Jack's gaze softened, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, the weight of their shared experiences, struggles, and quiet growth hanging in the air. It wasn't a grand confession or a dramatic declaration. It was a recognition of what they had built together. Trust, understanding, and a deep connection that had grown slowly, steadily, and naturally. Days turned into weeks, and Emily realized that her feelings for Jack had grown stronger. She admired him, respected him, and felt a warmth whenever he was near. It was a calm, steady feeling, not the wild excitement she had known in fleeting moments of her past, but a quiet certainty that she had found someone she could rely on, someone who valued her for who she truly was. One evening after a long day working in the fields, they sat by the fire. The sky outside was painted with deep oranges and purples, and the first stars were beginning to appear. Emily held a cup of tea in her hands, feeling the heat against her fingers, and watched the flames dance in the hearth. "You've changed this place," Jack said quietly. "It feels warmer, brighter, not just because of the work, but because of you."
Emily's heart fluttered. She felt seen, appreciated, and valued in a way she hadn't known she could be. I just wanted to help," she whispered, "but I think you gave me more than I could have imagined."
"I didn't give you anything you didn't deserve. You earned everything here, Emily. You worked, you trusted, and you opened your heart. And because of that, I want you to know that this place, this life,
It can be yours too, in every way you want it to be. Emily felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of safety and belonging.
the first time in years she didn't feel fear or uncertainty. She felt at home. Breaths, she felt valued. She felt hope. The next morning, they walked together along the edge of the property. The sun was shining, the air was crisp and clean, and the world seemed filled with possibility. Emily glanced at Jack, feeling a quiet courage building inside her. "Jack," she said softly, I want to stay. Not just for a little while, but for good.
I want this life, this place, and I want you in it too.
Jack stopped and looked at her, his eyes steady and warm. Emily, I've wanted the same thing for a long time.
I just didn't want to rush it. I wanted it to be real, to grow naturally.
Emily felt her heart lift. It is real.
And I trust it. I trust us. Jack smiled, reaching out to take her hand.
Then let's make it our forever. Together.
They stood there for a moment, hands entwined, feeling the gentle breeze on their faces, the sun warming their backs, and the quiet assurance that they had found something rare and lasting.
It wasn't just shelter, or safety, or survival. It was love, respect, trust, and a future built together. Over the following weeks, they worked side by side, building not just fences and barns, but a life together. Emily continued to learn, to grow, and to share in the responsibilities of the ranch, but she also shared in the joys, the laughter, the quiet evenings by the fire, the simple pleasures of daily life. And Jack in turn shared his world, his skills, and his heart with her, offering a partnership built on trust, patience, and genuine care. Spring turned into summer, and the ranch flourished. The animals thrived, the fields bloomed, and the house felt alive with warmth and laughter. Emily and Jack had built something more than a home. They had built a life together, one filled with respect, love, and a quiet, enduring joy. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills and painted the sky in brilliant shades of gold and pink, they sat on the porch together, wrapped in blankets, watching the world come alive in color and light. Emily rested her head on Jack's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, and smiled. "I never thought I'd find a place where I truly belong," she said softly. Jack kissed the top of her head gently. "You belong here, Emily. You've earned it, and we've built it together. This is our forever." Emily closed her eyes, letting the warmth, the love, and the safety sink in. For the first time in her life, she felt completely at peace. The storms of her past were behind her, replaced by a life of hope, trust, and enduring love. And in Jack, she had found not just a protector, but a partner, a friend, and someone who made the world feel brighter, simply by being in it. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Emily and Jack sat in silence, holding hands, knowing that they had found something rare and beautiful. A home. A life. And for the first time in years, Emily felt completely and utterly safe, loved, and at peace.